Hey everyone, this is Exploring Fiction, and welcome back to another video. So, just as the title of the video says, today I will be ranking the 25 James Bond films from the worst to the best. So, just before I start ranking, just to let you know, these rankings are my subjective opinion, and they're just kind of based on enjoyment, rewatchability, and also a little bit on how objectively well I think they're done. But overall, this is just my list. There might be some hot takes. We're not all going to agree, so leave your list in the comments below. I would love to talk James Bond movies with you. But anyway, let's get right into the list. And coming in at number 25 is A View to a Kill. This is Roger Moore's final outing as Bond, and for me it was just devoid of any charm, and therefore isn't a lot of fun to watch. The main plot is shaky, and Moore's stunt doubles are blatantly obvious and ruin the immersion at times. Christopher Walken and Grace Jones as Max Zorin and Mayday, respectively, are the only saving graces, but still, not much brings me back to this film, and so it comes in last place. At number 24 is Die Another Day. And I was tempted to put this film last due to its terrible special effects, repetitive yet somehow still over-the-top plot, and terrible villain dynamic and twist, but there is still some fun to be had. The pre-credit scene and the dueling scene are both standouts, and Brosnan is still solid as Bond. At number 23, Diamonds Are Forever. I don't know if I can exactly explain why I don't enjoy this film as much as Connery's others, but it just falls flat for me in multiple ways. Connery phones it in as Bond, which is a shame. Charles Gray as Blofeld doesn't really work for me, and this film just lacks the fun of its predecessors, in my opinion. At number 22, I have Spectre. One of my least rewatched Bond films. It's really only dragged down by one main thing: the forced interconnectedness of Craig's Bond universe. While Daniel Craig's Bond is a soft reboot of the character, I don't think there's any reason to have Christoph Waltz's Blofeld be behind all the other Craig films, like he implies when and tells Bond when Bond gets captured by him, how he's behind all the other villains from the previous movies. I just don't think that's a great decision at all. I think it's a terrible decision. But still, Spectre has some redeemable qualities, mainly the helicopter fight and Ralph Fiennes as M. At number 21, The Man with the Golden Gun. I really want to put this movie higher on the list, but I just can't. Christopher Lee as Scaramanga is just as great as it sounds, and the whole idea of good assassin versus bad assassin with a chip on his shoulder is great, but everything else about this film is just dull and uninteresting, and it's really a shame. Coming in at number 20 is Tomorrow Never Dies. This film has been getting a lot of love on the internet recently, but I just find it to be one of Brosnan's most boring Bond films. Jonathan Pryce as Elliot Carver is a great and new villain for the franchise, but I felt the execution of his plan leaned too hard into established Bond tropes when it could have done something more unique. The Bond girl being a rival assassin who's forced to work with him to achieve a common goal is a nice touch, though. At number 19 is Quantum of Solace. I'll admit, I have a bit of a soft spot for this film. Though Green is a real low-stakes villain, I still like him on screen. He comes off as a slimy, backstabbing guy, and I thought he worked well enough. Yes, the script was not great and the action scenes were extremely shaky, but in defense of the latter, I felt like this movie portrays a brutal Bond out to get revenge, lashing out against anyone and everyone in his way, better than it gets credit for. At the 18 spot, For Your Eyes Only. This Bond film has a unique feel to it, and I have mixed feelings about it. The main villain, Aristotle Christados, though played by great actor Julian Glover, was very weak and forgettable, but this film has its moments. Moore as Bond was more brutal here than we've ever seen him. The character of Columbo is a great Bond ally, and many of the action scenes are intense and just plain fun to watch, mainly the rock climbing scene. Coming in at number 17, Dr. No. The first ever Bond film. I feel this one suffers from being the one to pave the way. It doesn't quite execute Bond tropes well, because this is the film that establishes them, and everything just seems a bit plain when compared to later films. Also, the low stakes of many action scenes bring down its ranking a bit, as well as the fact that Dr. No isn't even in most of the movie, and his death is very sudden and anticlimactic. Still, it has plenty of charm, and Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No is sinister and has great screen presence. At number 16 is Moonraker. Without a doubt the most over-the-top Bond film, it's still a lot of fun. Michael Lonsdale as Hugo Drax has a hypnotizing screen presence, and the movie is just fun and rewatchable even though it's really silly. The space sequences are obviously dated now, but there's still a lot of enjoyment to be had, and I can rewatch this film over and over. At number 15, I have the most recent film in the Bond universe as of this video, No Time to Die. A farewell to Daniel Craig as Bond, No Time to Die is probably the most polarizing movie in the franchise. I already have a couple videos on the channel about this movie, so I'll keep it more brief. The action and story are strengths, in my opinion, but Bond's weepiness and Rami Malek as Safin bring this film down a bit. Also, even though it is something new to spice up the franchise, the ending to this movie just doesn't sit right with me, at least for now. And if you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm talking about. At number 14, Thunderball. Though I'll admit this film gets a bit boring at times, for me it's saved by Sean Connery. His suave, charming portrayal of Bond in his fourth 007 film is one of his best, and I can't help but to be drawn in. Emilio Largo is a cool villain. The evil scheme actually makes sense, and it isn't too wacky, and I'm actually a fan of all the underwater fight scenes. At number 13, The World Is Not Enough. One of the first Bond films I ever saw, back when I knew very little about 007, this movie was even better than I remember upon rewatch. The villains were fantastic, both Elektra King, played by Sophie Marceau, who is, I think, the real main villain of this movie, and Renard, played by Robert Carlyle. They're both great. Denise Richards was definitely a miscast, but it didn't bother me too much. I like seeing Judi Dench's M play a bigger role, and of course Desmond Llewellyn's final appearance as Q is heartwarming, yet also ominous in a way. Robbie Coltrane as Zukovsky is an underrated character in this film, and as you can see, I just love the cast, which is really what carries this one for me. At number 12, I have Live and Let Die. Roger Moore's first appearance as Bond, this film is just pure fun. From the setting, to the characters, to Moore's breath of fresh air portrayal as 007, it's just enjoyable from start to finish. There are tons of exciting sequences, including the gator stunt and boat chase. My only gripes revolve around the main villain. Yaphet Kotto as Mr. Big and / Kananga is great, don't get me wrong, but I think his final fight with Bond and his death are both anticlimactic. And after reading the Live and Let Die novel, I kind of wish we'd gotten a Mr. Big more akin to how he's portrayed in that book. Still, this movie was tons of fun. Coming in at number 11, The Spy Who Loved Me. One of Moore's better outings as Bond, there are a few things that elevate this one for me. First, the idea of Bond working with another agent that is waiting to kill him once their mission is done is great and had some good tense moments, and is just an overall great premise. Second, while Stromberg is a forgettable villain at best, the final fight aboard his ship, not his lair, his ship, was breathtaking and one of the best in the series. Personally, I felt this was because it felt more personal. As Bond, the standout supporting character, Commander Carter, and their allies all feel pinned down inside the massive ship, fighting for their lives and to save the world. Though other Bond films have done this one executed it best, in my opinion. Finally, Richard Kiel as Jaws is one of the best henchmen to grace this series, and so there's really a lot to love here, and that's why it comes in at number 11. At number 10 is a very controversial pick, but I have Octopussy. Definitely a bit of a controversial ranking, like I said. I just think this one might be the most fun Bond film. To me, it feels like an Indiana Jones movie with all the exotic locations and scenarios, and it all just works. From the Indian Palace to Octopussy's Island to the circus, the combined settings of the movie might just be the best in the series. Similar, the cast is just as memorable. Though aging, Moore is great as Bond, Maud Adams is cast perfectly as Octopussy, and Louis Jordan is the underrated Bond villain, Kamal Khan. I love Steven Berkoff in Beverly Hills Cop as Victor Maitland, so seeing him here in a more exuberant role as General Orlov was great. Though there are some flaws, such as the climax of the movie having Bond dressed like a literal clown, that are really head-scratching ideas, I can truly say it's a joy to watch this movie every time it's on. And so for that reason, I have this movie at number 10 on my list. At number 9, I have GoldenEye. Yes, I know having GoldenEye outside the top 5 might be considered slander, but I still do love this film. The cast and plot are the highlights, with all the villains having great moments, motivation, and writing behind their characters. Sean Bean as Alec Trevelyan /006 gives a stellar performance, as usual, from him. Famke Janssen as Xenia Onatop is a great femme fatale character to add to the Bond universe, and Alan Cumming as Boris is unforgettable. Pierce Brosnan makes a cold but memorable debut as Bond, along with Judi Dench as M, and even Wade is a great comedic relief character as the American ally in place of Felix Leiter. The plot around the GoldenEye satellite and execution of the plot points in this movie are seamless, too. The Bond girl in this film, Natalia, is a bit lacking, and the romance between her and Bond slowed the film down a bit in places for me. So while I do love this film, there are just more that I like a little bit better. At number 8, License to Kill. One of the most brutal Bond films, certainly the most before the Craig era. I can't say enough about License to Kill. Sanchez, the drug lord villain, is memorable, as is a young Benicio del Toro. And Timothy Dalton feels like what James Bond should be. But what is really great about this feel is that it finally feels like the dangerous life Bond lives has consequences and many dangers around every turn. Felix Leiter gets brutally injured by shark bite, which is the catalyst for the rest of the movie, and it feels not only like Bond is fighting for something, but also that something like that could happen to him at any time. And this time, MI6 isn't exactly backing him up. Overall, the darkness and brutality of this film really work and elevate this one near to the top for me. Coming in at number 7, From Russia with Love. The Bond franchise really got closer to hitting its stride with this film, and the best part about it is the constant tension. From the opening chess match played by Spectre's number 5 Kronstein all the way till the end of the movie, tensions are always running high. Whether it be Bond going about his business unknowingly working with the Russian agent Tatiana, Spectre number 1 issuing orders to Rosa Klebb, or Bond attempting to outwit Red Grant on the Orient Express, every scene and sequence feels tense and important. The action is great as well, with the standouts being the boat explosion scene and the fight on the train. At number 6 is The Living Daylights. Probably yet another hot take. I believe this film is the most overlooked in the franchise. Just as in License to Kill, Timothy Dalton as James Bond is captivating, and there are so many standout sequences in this film. The pre-credit sequence might just be in my top 3 in the entire franchise, and the final fight in Afghanistan is better than it gets credit for. The whole plot point of the fake defection by General Koskov as an attempt to orchestrate the assassination of General Pushkin was something I found fun and intriguing. Mariam Diabo as Kara is one of my favorite Bond girls, and who doesn't love John Rhys-Davies, who portrays General Pushkin in this film? At number 5, You Only Live Twice. Now this is my James Bond guilty pleasure film. Though most people think it has no business being ranked over the likes of From Russia with Love or GoldenEye, and they may be right, I can't help but put it in my top 5. First of all, I love the setting of Japan, as I've always wanted to go there, and there's just a certain connection I feel whenever I see a film use Japan as a setting. I love Donald Pleasance as our fully first visible Blofeld, as he sets the standard as a Bond villain and even creates his own character trope. His volcanic lair is the best in the series, and the final battle is a blast to watch. Also, Nancy Sinatra's theme is in my top 5 Bond songs. So though there are some elements in this film that I won't deny bring it down for most people, it is in my top 5 for very subjective reasons. Coming in at number 4 on my list, Goldfinger. Now this is my favorite of Sean Connery's films, and Goldfinger felt like the first Bond film to follow the standard formula, and I mean that in the best way possible. Sean Connery is at his best. The main villains of Auric Goldfinger and Oddjob are the most memorable in the entire franchise, and the plot is masterfully executed, as well as being fun to boot. Filled with classic Bond moments, I knew this film was in my top 5 when I got immersed in the intense golf sequence between Bond and Goldfinger. If a movie can make me care about a golf scene, it's gotta be great, and so that's why it comes in at number 4. Now, guys, we reach my top 3, and trust me, it was pretty tough to figure out which movies I put where in this top 3. But coming in at number 3, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I might consider this the pinnacle of classic Bond. The plot is believable and at the level of world-threatening without being too goofy, and I really love the cast. I'm personally a big fan of George Lazenby's James Bond, but regardless of what you think about him, Diana Rigg as Tracy and Telly Savalas as a more physical Blofeld are both top-notch. Of course, I must mention John Barry's unforgettable score, and though Louis Armstrong's We Have All the Time in the World is many people's favorite song from this movie, I prefer the melancholy yet royal opening theme song. There are so many memorable sequences, including Bond's ski chase escape from Piz Gloria, Bond and Tracy's car escape, and the final assault on Piz Gloria. I love the idea of Bond going outside of MI6 to take down Blofeld, instead turning to Tracy's mafia-connected father, and of course I love the bold and new idea of Bond falling in love and eventually getting married, only to have it taken away from him all in the final scene. It makes the movie feel as though it's in a league of its own, and it very well may be the best of the classic Bond films. Coming in at number 2 is Skyfall. This is the Bond film I've watched the most, and I would even go as far as to say I think it's perfect. Daniel Craig is great as a weathered James Bond back from retirement, only with more scars. Javier Bardem as villain Raul Silva is great and eccentric and feels more personal a villain than many films, and Judi Dench as M is the real underrated star here. She feels like the Bond girl of this movie, but more as a maternal figure with one last fight in her. Ralph Fiennes as Gareth Mallory, aka M at the end, is a great addition to the cast, and the new Q is a fantastic contrast as a young, witty personality to Bond's grumpy one. All the action scenes are enthralling, but the story behind it really elevates them all. Silva trying to strike back at M specifically makes things feel more personal, as I noted before, and the final fight set at Skyfall, Bond's homestead from his youth, adds to that even more. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. However, there's just no denying the objective greatness of number 1 on this list, Casino Royale. This movie is perfect in every way. Daniel Craig is great as a fresh James Bond. Eva Green as Bond girl Vesper Lynd adds dimensions to a character usually only cast for looks. The underrated Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre is chilling and even horrifying, and the movie is just perfectly paced. The romance between Bond and Vesper is in the film just enough to grip you, but it doesn't take over or overstay its welcome, and instead lets the biggest highlight of the movie shine: the action sequences. Every single action sequence in this movie is not only breathtaking, but unforgettable. From the black and white noir-style pre-credit scene, to the parkour chase, to the airport scene, it's all top-tier movie making. This film is so easy to get lost in and captivated by, and therefore, it is my number 1 James Bond film. So guys, there you have it. There's my comprehensive list of all 25 James Bond films ranked from worst to best. Let me know below, like I said, your list in the comments. I would love to hear it. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new here. I would love to have you. And as always, I will see you next time.